Today's ABM conversation is presented by Web Insights. Web Insights offers intelligent website visitor automation, the right opportunities, routed to the right team, at the right time. Here's your host, Christa, to get the conversation started. Let's go.
That's right. Let's go. How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining us. Another webinar here with Web Insights. Today, we're going to talk about ABM. If you're joining us and you're wondering, Christoph, knock it off with the acronyms, we're going to keep using that acronym, account-based marketing. That's what it stands for. I know many of you know it, and if you don't know it, now is the time to learn it because it is a good strategy. So we're going to go around the room here, so to speak, introduce everybody, and then we're going to have a great discussion. If you have any questions, we are live on all the different networks, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the webinar side, and Amazon Live as well. Feel free to leave a question. We'll try to answer it. That's a lot of networks, so if I miss your question, don't get mad at me. I'll do my best. So I'm Christoph Trapp, live streamer, podcast host of the Business Storytelling Show. Also do content strategy at VoxPopMe, which is a market research firm for offering video surveys to brands. So let's go around the room here. Christa, welcome back to the show. It was great to have you on. I don't know when. Seems like a couple weeks ago, but it's been longer. Remind us who you are.
Thanks, Christoph, and it's great to be back. So thank you very much for inviting me. Again, my name is Christa Norton, and I am Head of Industry and Account-Based Marketing at Capita, which is probably best known for being an outsourced provider based in the UK.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's go with Martin Boyle was just on the show, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. We had a really super fast 27-minute session because it was also being broadcast on TV, and you know TV people need their ad space. Martin, welcome back. Tell us about you, fellow contenteer. Always good to talk to you.
Hi, Christoph. Yep, good to be back. So I'm the marketing director over at Web Insights, and yeah, lovely to be back.
Awesome. And finally, Karen Carter with Cvent. I've worked with Cvent before. I worked at Meetings Today in the meetings industry. So familiar with Cvent for sure, a market leader out there. Karen, welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Christoph. Sorry, of course, my headset decided to do something strange right as you were introducing me. I am Karen Carter. I am the Director of Enterprise Marketing for Europe at Cvent, which is an event technology platform. And I'm excited to have learned from everyone today and have a great conversation about the world of account-based marketing.
And what I love about that comment is you guys are here to teach us, but what I've learned as well, that every time I'm talking to anybody, even when I know a lot about the topic, there's always something I learn as well. So let's get started here. We got the acronym out of the way so people can stop screaming at me about that. But what does a successful ABM campaign, account-based marketing?
So I'm happy to kick off. Yeah, so I would say successful ABM campaign would be a happy customer and a good return on your marketing investment. So I think a lot of it stems from you only want to be selling to people who you can help. Otherwise, you're going to an awful lot of effort, and then you're going to lose them. You're either going to lose them before you make the sale, or you're going to get them in and you're going to have an unhappy customer at some point if the product or service isn't right for them. So I think that's where obviously the ideal customer profile comes in. And I think it pays to be really picky about who you want to target. So look at the attributes that work really well with your product or service. And then obviously the aim is happy customers. If you've got happy customers, hopefully you get negative churn, where obviously you're generating more revenue from your existing customers month over month than you're losing from people actually churning. So that's how you're going to get consistent growth. And then the bit about good return on investment, I would say, I think there's a stat that was something along the lines of 90% or more than 90% of B2B marketers said that ABM gives a better return on investment than kind of the old school spray and pray approach. So it makes sense. You know, there's high value accounts. You can focus your energies, focus your resources in the right places. So those I suppose would be my two main things: happy customer, good ROI.
Well, we always want happy customers, right? Other than people screaming at us on the phone. And what's interesting, when you were just talking about that, Martin, I mean, back in the day, there weren't very many ways to reach out to specific companies, right? You had to stop by, and basically that's it, right? You knock on the door and say, hey, I'm Christoph, you want to buy a copier, or I mean, whatever, right? So that's interesting, because today there's so many more channels, even from direct mail. I know it's not dead yet. Just look at my mailbox, quite frankly, through targeting on the website, to calling people, to emailing people. I mean, the channels are endless. Karen, how is it looking at Cvent? What's how do you guys think about account-based marketing, and how do you get started?
Yeah, it's interesting in listening to Martin. I mean, from what success looks like, probably not dissimilar. But one of the things that we're also really taking a look at, because we're in some ways almost early in our journey of how we define account-based marketing strategies. And a lot of this is just looking across so many things. Are we clear on who we're talking to and where they are? Do we understand the inbound versus outbound and what's working for us as far as different channels? And taking all of that knowledge that we have in in a non-account-based model, how do we then apply that in that individual experience, that personalization side of how we want to engage with customers in an organization? And one of the things I certainly talk about at a strategic level is the idea of the funnel in B2B, in my opinion, is, I don't want to say it's dead, but for me, it goes into, and I'm sure we can all find these images in Google of like a bow tie. So there's how we push them in, but then we've done that initial sale, might be that first step in that journey with that organization. How do we then think about the success we can have both from an upsell and cross-sell perspective across an organization, as well as then how we retain people? So there's kind of two parallel paths we look at to drive success. One is new companies we maybe don't have a relationship with, as well as the ones that we do. And that informs how we think about the conversations we have, the personalization we might need to do, the channels that are going to reach them, and then how we can scale that for efficiency and take learnings from one organization or one vertical, for example, to another. So there's lots of this early thinking that's going on, but it's trying to take some of the things that we've historically had success with, particularly with smaller organizations, and then apply those learnings and then dial that up from a personalization perspective with a large enterprise account.
You know, the one thing I just thought about too when you were talking, so certainly I am not the spray and pray kind of guy at all. I want to create content for people, right, that I'm targeting, you know, and make it specific to them. And that's hard enough as it is when it comes to just general content strategy. But when I just listen to you talk personalization, I mean, you really got to get that right when you're talking to specific groups of people in a company. I mean, even from the verbiage do they use, right? You have to have the right brand style, you know, don't call something the wrong name or have the wrong spellings.
And as a global company, there's the nuances of country differentiation. How do you need to talk to these businesses from a North America versus Europe? What are those nuances? There's also, and the thing that I think becomes critical, and shockingly with some of the most historically successful businesses I've still seen, it's that right hand talking to the left. And in an organization that might have silos, is marketing, learning and listening and having conversations with the sales organization, with your customer success people to kind of close those feedback loops Because coming back to the ROI, there might be the success that marketing drives from a qualified leads into the database or what you're building. But then the other side of this is what I've seen listed as customer retention optimization. How do you take those customers you have, retain them, excite them, and turn that into a cross-sell or upsell opportunity, even just basic referral from one division to another. So it's one of the things I love about it, and why I think B2B is fascinating, is that complexity. So to your point is, how do you get down into the details and nuance of the content itself, but then drive that level of engagement and ensure that we as an organization are having the right conversations to learn as we go with a specific account across marketing, sales, customer success.
I think that's an easy one to forget, right? We're always just pushing people in the funnel, like, let's get you in the door. It's like, hey, how do we get the first date? Oh my God, now the guy's using date analogies here in marketing once again. But I mean, that's, you have to retain the people as well once they're in the door. Christa, what else have we not mentioned when it comes to getting started with a good ABM strategy?
Oh my God, and we've mentioned so much. I mean, I have to say, just reflecting on, what's already been said by Karen and by Martin, I think the thing that sort of draws together what they've said is very much relevancy. And I just wanted to echo that, because we sort of hadn't said it, but we'd sort of skirted around. So and I suppose for everybody who's listening, front of mind all the time, what's unique about ABM is that real relevancy that you can get to. I mean, from my side of things, what makes a successful campaign, I think the beauty of ABM is that you can actually move away to a certain extent from funnel and MQL and some of those sorts of things, to start to say, well, actually with this account, with this particular ABM account, and I work very much on the one-to-one ABM, have we met the business objectives? Because I think for me, the thing that is most successful, the thing that really drives success in ABM is that real interlock between marketing and sales, where actually you're not marketing and sales anymore. You are a team of people all working together and bringing different skills to bear to solve the challenges of building relationships within the account, and thus building more business and selling across a plethora. So whether it is whether you are helping because you are creating relationships to enable white space, or whether it's because you are running initiatives that enable strategic alignment, what are the business objectives for this account? What is it that we need to do? Do we need to re-sign a multi-million-pound deal? Do we need to expand? Do we need to protect? Are we under attack from other competitors who have a positioning that might be more innovative, or might just be it's not you, because you've been in a long-term relationship and you need to bring some honeymoon back to a relationship or something like that. So, success for me is all about, if you have got if you get to the stage where you were as critical to the salespeople as your solutions architect and your account managers and everyone, that's when you've become really successful, because that's when you're offering, sort of adding real value into the account. So we very much measure on sales feedback, as well as customer and NPS, as well as down the line pipeline and so on.
I always have a little bit of an interesting feeling when people talk about sales and marketing relationships. And I got to be honest, it's the baggage. I've worked with fantastic sales teams who are true partners. And I've worked with sales teams who think they can order copywriting as a service, which is, I don't think is a thing that works anymore today. Do you know what I mean? You have to be collaborative. You have to say, so if somebody comes to you and says, hey, Christoph, we need some content. I have a shirt. You know what the shirt says? I don't have it on right now. It says, this shirt is a content asset. If I don't know anything else about what you're trying to do, I can't help you. I can literally just say, here's a pound of content. Like, it doesn't help you, doesn't help me, doesn't help anybody. So I'm a big, big believer in collaboration. Definitely work together with the sales team. But guys and gals It has to be a team effort. You have to collaborate. You have to have those open conversations. I mean, do you guys disagree with that?
Well, I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. And there's been some really interesting debate on LinkedIn over the past couple of days that have made me feel quite despondent because, clearly in some cases there still is quite a view of marketing that I certainly couldn't work within an organisation where salespeople felt like that. But I also think, it is incumbent on us, and particularly with ABM, where we are focused so much on our understanding of the client, it is absolutely incumbent on us then to have that knowledge, to have that understanding and to earn that. I think a lot of, great salespeople, they really understand their customers. They understand what is going on. They are, absolutely tunnel vision about doing the best thing for their customers. Those are the great sales guys, aren't they? The ones where they don't not particularly bothered about profit. They want to do the best thing for their customers. And, I think if we're expecting to rack up and be part of the team, be treated, we've got to earn that. And we can earn that by going in there and really understanding, and by doing, I always talk about research as being, the most important tactic for account-based marketing. You've got to go in there and you've got to be able to tell the salespeople, or your account lead, or your account team, you've got to be able to tell them something that they don't already know. Otherwise, what value really are you bringing to the party? So I do think there is a case of, that is a, if you're going to have that sort of relationship, you've got to earn your place, as does every other member of the team. And I think when you go in there and when you take that approach, and when you're able to demonstrate, great understanding, when you're able to have the very latest news and get that in front of them, when you're able to bring perspectives that they're not aware of, and really bring that insight and add that value, that's when you really start to build that trust. You really start to become that critical friend, where they're then coming to you and saying, we need some sort of door opener. What do you think we could do? How can we get in front of these people? What do you think they're interested in? Tell me. That takes time to build that relationship. And I think, we'd all agree ABM is it is a slow burn. You do need to find some quick wins when you're starting off. And Karen, I can see you nodding already around that. So we've all been in that, having to find the quick wins around ABM. But, it's really, really important, I think, to position that this is a long-term strategy, in the same way that sales are it's a long-term relationship build. It's not a quick win.
I think, and to me, it goes to the heart of, I call it smarketing. Just you have to have a buzzword in marketing.
Like that.
But I think part of the challenge is also, and I'm gonna be ridiculously provocative. This ought to kick off a whole lot of conversation. In times when I've led both sales and marketing organizations, I make the argument that marketing, or marketers, just by the nature of what we do, have to take a slightly longer term strategic view. How you build the brand is not something you do overnight. How you engage with the customer, depending on, regardless of the business, the industry, is something that takes time to do. So we play a long game. Sellers, particularly people who are in there, they have their quota, and they know that they hit this number in this amount of time, quarterly, monthly, whatever it may be, they get something for that generally. I'm going to traditional kind of sell things. So that balance between short-term need, long-term strategy becomes an interesting pivot point, and completely agree with what you're saying around research, but it's also how you, in some ways, educate at senior levels, and to make sure that while you're finding those quick wins, that's why I was laughing and nodding a bit, is how do we find those quick things? It's helping them to understand that the longer term play is what in the long run is going to achieve you your best results. And particularly in my piece of the world that I focus on, which is large enterprise businesses, selling cycles by their nature are 12 to 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
So it almost plays in with that ability to play the long game and figure out the ways to learn and drive that. I also think that with research is, at risk of a segue, is the technology and the platforms you have to bear, where you could just hold up and say, we did this and it resulted in that. So this is where the world now of having platform and tech and data to come back in and more quickly react and change when you need to, becomes quite useful in how marketing shows value across the sales organization.
I think a key thing about that, just to go back, because I agree there's a great segue into tech and reporting and so on, but I did just want to cover off, I think that's why account selection then is so important as well, because, you know, you need to be you know, going into your ABM with accounts that are, you know, long-term accounts. ABM is not just because it gets great results. It's not because it's, you know, ideally suited for everything. Getting the right, you know, working with sales to choose the right accounts that are going to go into an ABM program, and being really willing to walk away from accounts that are not right. And there's all sorts of reasons why an account may or may not be the right account for an ABM program, but choosing the wrong account won't get you results, because, you know, if there's an expectation of, you know, we've got to sell something quickly, you know, there's other marketing strategies that are ideal to support that. You're absolutely right. It is a long-term play.
You know, walking away from accounts, though, because they're the wrong account, I think that's hard. I think it makes sense, right? If you're spending time, if you're running an ABM campaign on an account, they can't even, you know, afford your product. I mean, what a waste of money, what a waste of resources. But I think that is something that it takes getting used to, right, by people to figure that out and focus their time on where it makes the most sense.
It's not that we walk away from a marketing perspective. It just means that ABM isn't the right strategy for this customer at this time. And I think we do need to think about ABM as a marketing strategy that we apply to solve a particular business challenge. You know, in the same way that there are other, you know, challenges, you know, you can apply ABM to solve brand challenges. You know, there are other strategies that you use. So it's, you know, it's very much sort of part of the toolbox. And I think you've got to realize that, you know, sometimes it's not the right strategy. Sometimes it really, really isn't. And that's why it's so important to work together to be able to have those quick wins, so that you can get some sense very, very quickly. Got to have the sales engagement, because if it's not a partnership, then again, you can't understand quickly whether it's the right account, whether there's really the opportunity. We've had several accounts where we've looked at it and they've been big, massive FTSE 100 names. We've looked at it and gone, this just isn't the right account for us, because ABM is really expensive. You know, we talk about ROI, but it's a big investment to get a big reward. You know, you make that investment and you don't really think you've got a chance of getting the reward, then it's, you know, it's bad money after bad.
So let's dive over into content a little bit. So I know you, Christa, and my apologies, throwing up the wrong lower third. It's like a little bitty thing over here on my screen. I know who everybody is by now. My apologies. So when we talk about investment, though, I mean, I'm thinking about content, right? When we plan content, and you have to personalize it to an extent. You have to get the language right. You have to figure out what's the best message for whomever the customer is, whoever the prospect is. So what tips do you guys have on planning that content? What can you do?
Again, I can. Oh, sorry, Martin, you go.
Okay, thanks, Christa. So again, it comes back to being customer-centric. What does your prospect or customer, what do they care about? How can you add value? What are their problems? And then in the content, you want to kind of get the pain points in. But I think it comes down to also how you're segmenting within your ideal customer profile as well. So, you know, you're going to talk to a salesperson differently to how you're going to talk to a marketing person or a customer success person. And also it depends on if you're doing one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, kind of how you play it. And content will change depending on the medium. Content can also change depending on the context. So, you know, if you know that the prospect or customer has hit a certain page on your website, for instance, and they've looked at a certain thing, you can kind of build some content around that. So, you know, you could have a triggered email that just goes off, or one of your team can reach out. So, you know, so again, it's that kind of the human connection kind of thing, if it's a one-to-one or one-to-few, but there are other tools that you can use as well, obviously. And then I think there's there's a whole thing around you need to be a bit creative to, I think sometimes, to kind of jolt people out of just thinking, oh, this is, what is this? So, there's like lots and lots of examples out there. The one that I've mentioned the other day, which was Gum Gum, a tech company, found out that the CEO of T-Mobile was a massive Batman fan, and they created a comic book with him in it, and that helped them to win the account. So it's just things like that. Obviously, that's taken up a lot of time and resources, but it's absolutely been a great investment for them. That's at the kind of that one-to-one extreme. But yeah. So there we go. That's my 2 cents.
That's your answer, and you're sticking to it.
Yep.
So what's the definition of marketing to a few? Like, how many is that, I guess? Is there a number we can throw on that? Do you know what I mean? Just to give people an idea.
15. Around 15 for a cluster.
For cluster people, got it. Christa, I know you were going to jump in as well. What tips do you have when it comes to planning content?
So I think there's a couple of things. You use different content for different purposes. So I think my first thing would be, okay, well, what do you want this piece of content to achieve? Is it about, raising awareness of a challenge? Is it about raising awareness of a particular problem? What is it that you actually want the content to do? Because that's obviously going to lead into then, okay, well, what channel is going to be right? How are we going to present this? Is this, long form, or is it sort of simple to consume? Are we going to do something that's sort of more interactive, or is it, just a white paper? And I think sort of understanding what we want it to do, and then really, and again, this is from a one-to-one perspective, but when we think about our audience, and we may well be considering an audience of one, or an audience of one and direct reports for a single piece of content. So really trying to understand what are both the personal and the professional challenges of the target audience. So we undertake an awful lot of profiling so that we really understand it, as Martin was just talking about, understanding that someone likes Batman might be the sort of thing that you therefore want to bring in if you've sort of got a more sort of joyous piece of content that you're creating, to really help differentiate. You have to be a bit careful that you don't turn into stalkers, but we've all had that thing that's turned up where it's just been really personal and it's just lovely, and you feel like you've had that, someone's taken the time to actually make an effort. There's nothing worse now than getting something that isn't at least a little bit personalized. So I think it's understanding the audience, but understanding then, that real, what do we want the audience to think, do, feel? And they're quite, that can be quite hard, can be quite a laborious process to go through, but that is the way that, again, to come back to my favorite word, relevancy, someone's just going to be more engaged by a piece of content if it really feels hyper relevant to them.
The only thing I would add to that is I'm hooking on what you're talking about around that. We keep talking about personal, and one of the things I'm constantly looking at, and I bet there's probably some good advice I could get from each of you and others, is how do we take the things and the learnings and best practices we see in what I would say traditionally is more B2C, because when you're reaching this more consumer customer, it's around uniqueness, and there's a level of creativity that I think gets applied there, and less so in perhaps more of these B2B constructs. People are still people. So the Batman comic is a perfect example of, it has nothing to do with what this person does all day. It's about what they like. So if we understand that general thing at their core is that regardless of what someone, walks into their office or their space of work to do, they still go home at night and like science fiction or like comic books or love their dog. So those understandings, and then thinking about the different channels to go after, I actually tend to look, it's like, do we look at all the channels we have available to us? So something that can be personalized and just knock someone away from, or differentiate, could be a physical piece of mail, or that thing that's delivered to the front desk, because everything's done digital these days. So I think this is where creativity can be used in unique ways based on the account and the understanding of the profile and doing all your homework and doing all that work to prep. Are there ways that you can create a unique experience that drives that personalization in a way that breaks out of the norms in some ways to create, dare I say, experiences beyond just the right name is at the top of the email and it was personalized to say Christa versus Karen.
Oh god, yeah, you've got to go beyond that. Otherwise, that is just personalization.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. I mean, I've worked in B2C and B2B, and I think that, so the example a minute ago, obviously when the person got that, it made them feel special. And, you know, in all of the textbooks, it says, oh, you know, B2C is all about emotional, B2C is all about emotional connections, and B2B is all about rational, logical decision making. But actually, I think there is quite a lot to be said for making that emotional connection. You're going to need all of the rest of the stuff to back it up, all of the rational, logical stuff behind it. But to make some impact, actually, the emotional connection is really strong.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
So I'm a big fan of stealing from anywhere, ideas. And I think the comment you made, Christa, on the whole personalization. So on my LinkedIn, I put a little microphone at the beginning of my name. So the people that don't know how to personalize automatically on LinkedIn, you know what they call me? The microphone emoji. Just the mic, right? Now I know there's ways around it because I know people who send me automated messages and it does not say the mic. It says Christoph, blah, 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 whatever. You know, so there's so many traps to fall into if you don't think about the personalization for sure. But I think, you know, for way too long, B2B marketers, and I'm a B2B marketer too, you know, they think of, oh, B2B is so different. We're so different. I mean, for real. And you know what? I see it actually, and this is an ABM campaign I saw the other day. It's repetition too. You know, if I see this content in front of my face on my Facebook feed, which allegedly I only use for personal things, at some point that might convince me to buy. What do you think of that? Am I just talking nonsense?
There's definitely I think there's definitely a channel play in how you get creative. Like I've gone to the extreme of, should we be using TikTok? Should we be using, I mean, it all comes down to how you can segment and how you can make sure you can target the right people with the right messages. But I think that if we don't break out and come up with more creative ways, you're not going to stand out with all of your competitors. And that I think has become even more acute, certainly in the last year, with how people get and consume information.
And this is why the profiling is so important, because what you need to do is be where your customers are or where your customer is, you know, certainly from a one-to-one perspective. And, you know, previously that just meant, you know, doing a bit of profiling around the media and things like that. Now it might be about creating opportunities to be where that customer is and so on. So yeah, you should never rule out a channel because you don't think it's a B2B channel. We've seen over the past 18 months, you know, with the pandemic, that just isn't isn't relevant anymore. You know, if your customer is doing videos on TikTok, you should be doing, you know, you should definitely be considering that as a channel, regardless of your brand.
Yep, absolutely. So we do have another guest joining us here. Hang with me while I'm trying to figure out how to add him to the screen. So you're going to look at me, everyone here, and I got to get rid of one thing. Ta-da! And then where did Zach go? There he is. And now Zach is on the show as well. Zach, can you hear us? Sound check live on the air.
How's everyone doing? Can you hear me?
Hey, Zach.
Hi, Zach.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
Thanks for joining us. If at the very least, I'm sure you're going to share fantastic insights like everybody else has already, but I couldn't look at myself in that picture anymore. I mean, thank you for helping me get rid of that. Zach, tell us about yourself.
How's everyone doing? I am Director of Customer Lifecycle Marketing at Sendoso. I've set up ABM at several other companies, including Aptus and Salesforce. And now we are continuing our ABM approach. I'm living on more of the post-sale side of the strategy.
The post-sale side, so that's retention, basically.
Yeah, retention, upsells, and expansion. So a little bit of everything.
Okay, very interesting. All right, let's hop into the next question, you guys. We're like 36 minutes in. I know we said 45 minutes to 50 some minutes, roughly, maybe an hour, depends on how it's looking. But the next question I have for everyone wants to know, what are the tools? What's the technology? What's the silver bullet? Blah, you know what I'm talking about, right? What's the next squirrel we have to chase? So what technology helps with account-based marketing? What tips do we have? Zach, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely, happy to. One of my favorite tools is Sixth Sense. It allows us to really organize our database, really understand who's paying attention, who's engaging, where their intent is, and then help us prioritize on the sales side. For the post-sales side, I'm going to do a little shout out for our company, Sendoso. We're a big fan of direct mail. So one-to-one sending is a great way to kind of add that layer of personalization into your engagement streams. And then I've always been really heavy with email, but being really cognizant of how and when and why you're reaching out to your prospects or customers. And so lately we've been ramping up on Iterable that really allows for super personalized and event-based nurture tracks. So we're not just kind of treating everybody lump sum within segments, but actually paying attention to how they're using our platform and recommending new features and driving them into new behaviors that way.
Yeah, I actually think the whole looking at people's behaviors in software especially is probably one of the things that's the easiest to forget about, right? And I know Karen mentioned that earlier, how do you retain people? And then you reach out to them. I mean, I get emails all the time from some of the tools that I use, and did you know you can do this? Did you know you can do that? So I think that's a fantastic way to do that. How about the rest of you? What tech do you guys use? What's your favorite tools when it comes to ABM?
It's funny because we're actually kind of on the start of our journey of taking a look at the right tools and systems and how do we apply. So part of the challenge for us also is like with existing systems that we use, what exists within there that can help support our account-based marketing efforts, then what do we need to add? So like one of the things we've been looking at is around personalization. Do you look at something like Turtle? I think Sixth Sense is one that's come up. So we're on the start of that journey. So I'm probably not, I will defer to Christa and Zach, and I'm actually writing down what you're saying because I'm curious to see what platforms we may not have looked at yet. I think the interesting thing for us in Europe as well, and Christa, I'm sure you've dealt with this, is also just thinking about GDPR and the more stringent regulations we have, and particularly when you get into like the DACH region and all that, the limits of what you can do mean we have to be even smarter about what platform can we use, what channels then we use to push these things out, like email as an example, just because we're limited. So that's also informing how we're looking at the right platform choices we make.
Yeah, I mean, we use Turtle and I absolutely love it in terms of, being able to create something quickly and easily that is totally personalized to a customer and to be able to track it because their metrics are really good. So, particularly from a one-to-one, I know they've got some personalization tools that they're working on as well, which also look really, really promising. So from a content perspective, I find that really useful. I mean, I think the, one of the things that I would call out is thinking about, tools to enable reporting and how we, making sure that your CRM is set up and enhanced to enable you to use the tech to report really accurately. Because I'm thinking, as we were saying earlier, at ABM, it's not like traditional marketing. You do not want to get into the stage where you're trying to report on an ABM campaign against MQLs or accepted leads or anything like that. So it is very much an attribution model rather than an origination model. And I think you need to be really I think making sure that your CRM and everything is set up effectively. We're using, we've just deployed Demand Farm, which enables us to do some really, really good mapping and things. And we're just looking at how we then apply that to make sure that we can really see the influence that marketing's having as well. So, and making sure that you can draw all of your different systems together to be able to provide that sort of holistic view of the impact that you're having on an account. Because you really don't want to be, we talked, I think, just earlier about touch points, didn't we? And, if somebody sees you on Facebook, is that relevant? Well, yes, because it's a touch point. And we know that our customers, especially in the C-suite or those senior decision makers, some of them are expecting around 20 touch points before they're even really willing to, to engage with, an existing supplier on a new product, for example. So, these touch points are really important. And I think, to go back to the Gartner that I think someone called in, mentioned earlier, we know that customers are getting to around 60% of the way through the buying cycle before they will even engage with sales. So we need to be able to demonstrate that actually we're influencing that 60%. We're right at that top of funnel, really, really pushing people through very quickly through all the various touch points. But if you can't bring them together into that overarching reporting and demonstrate the breadth of what you're doing, if you can sort of only demonstrate the web over here and social over here, then you can't articulate that story, and it's therefore very, very just difficult to create a narrative back to the business that genuinely that is believable in terms of the impact that you're having. So I would give a shout out to tech for your reporting, because at the end of the day, you've got to get the business buy-in and be able to really solidly demonstrate, particularly from an attribution perspective. It's much easier from an origination perspective. Either someone either came through a campaign or they didn't, and it's a little bit simpler. When you're demanding attribution, you do have to argue against that. Well, yeah, but we already knew this customer sort of argument.
Very interesting. And so how do you guys feel about, I still like to hear from Martin and Zach on what you guys' favorite technologies are. But the thing when you were talking, that I thought about is, technology has to be easy, right? And I know there's some aspects that will never be easy because you have to do things, right? I mean, even right now we're live streaming and it's about as easy as it can be, but I still have to do 8,000 things, right? And I don't know how that would become easier. But I'm thinking about, for example, the process. When I first grew up in marketing, we would write in Word documents. And I know some people still do that. I don't know why, but they do. Or they write in Google Docs, same thing. But when I'm doing a campaign now, so let's say, an email campaign for ABM, I write it in Pardot, or if you use Marketo or whatever, I think you should just write it wherever you need it. You need to cut down on the steps. You need to make it easy for everyone involved. And that's kind of my opinion. How do you guys feel about the ease of use of technology? How do you find what's easy to use?
Well,
I
think on that one, it's probably just a case of trial and error. And I think you're right. With Word and Google Docs, maybe just going straight into the technology, saves a bit of time. Happy days. I think coming back to the thing about the kind of the technology, obviously to do ABM well, you need that single version of the truth. So obviously the CRM is super important. CRM is only going to be as good as the data that's in it. So obviously, my little plug here for Web Insights, that can be really useful because it can, kind of reap the opportunities throughout different businesses. I mean, there are things as well, like obviously there's chatbots. We don't use them. We have real humans here, but I can see how it would work for large enterprise businesses with loads and loads of web traffic. Product called Webio as well. You can literally personalize your homepage. So when someone hits the website, it literally will kind of, say, oh, hi, such and such business, or, you can really get very clever with what you do around stuff like that. So yeah, there's just a couple of things that I thought I'd throw in there.
Now, wait a second here. Just like Karen, I'm trying to take notes, but I mean, this is just too much information too quickly. What is the tool that you use that updates the website based on businesses?
So it's a thing called Webio. That's a very handy piece of tech. It uses. So it's part of the same group, but it basically uses similar technology to Web Insights, reverse IP tracking. But it gives you that sort of instant on the website. Web Insights basically will power whatever system you want it to power. So it can power your marketing, or you can kind of, an opportunity comes in, it can send it off to your best salesperson. So yeah, I mean, there's heaps of stuff out there for ABM, and also again
there is.
Yeah, go on.
And that's the challenge, though, right? That's the challenge, to figure out what works. Now, you guys talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go check out Webio, and that sounds very promising. Now, Zach, what are your favorite tools, or did I already ask you that?
You asked, but I do want to echo what Martin mentioned. Obviously, there's a lot of trial and error, and just kind of plugging into communities and understanding who's using what. But like the really important thing is single source of truth and visibility. Like, can the other teams who need to interact with you have access to what you're accessing? Because if you're in a silo, it doesn't matter how easy the tool is, you're still going to have extra work to enable your sales team or CX team or whoever it is you're partnering with. And then how nicely does it play with everything already in your stack as well is super important, because once again, if you're away from where you're already working or where other people are already working, you're just adding complexity to the process.
Times 10, because I think one of the things that we're looking at is, when you're looking at your Marketo and Salesforce, and you're talking about complexity, spend 5 minutes in Salesforce. It's an incredible machine in what it does, but learning and using it well. And if there's one piece of advice I give to anyone who's just starting this journey and does not have a lot of MarTech is, like, if you can consider all the different uses and the kind of data you want to get and all that. And I'm not pretending that this is easy to do, but I think the further along you are in this journey, the dare I use the MacGyver reference, when you suddenly have to start, putting the fingers in the obligatory, Dutch dike to fix something, or something doesn't talk to the other, or so as much as you can be long-term and strategic in your marketing, how are you long-term and strategic about the technology that you use? I think that if you can do that at the start as best you can, it will save you a lot of pain as you go forward.
So, of course, people always want to measure everything, and I'm allergic to the only answer being revenue. So yes, we want revenue. I'm not opposed to money at all. So if anybody's adding me already about that, I'm not. But there's other things we have to measure, right, along the way. So other than, yes, we want to get to revenue down the road, what are key milestones? What do we measure? Is it, are people responding? Are people, what do we want people to do? Like, what's the, what do we look at?
So again, I mean, for me, it comes back to what I was saying earlier around what are the business objectives, because we should be measured against that, and the business will have objectives outside of a pipeline and revenue as well. So I think that's the key. I think we should stand up and be counted as part of the wider business objectives. I think that's really important to, secure future funding and so on. But I think you can look at things like, if you don't want to talk about pipeline, you might want to talk about funnel acceleration. You might want to talk about customer NPS, because this is all about building a really strong strategic relationship, certainly from a one-to-one perspective. It's about building that really strong strategic relationship, so the customer should really be feeling the difference and should be feeling the love, and if they're not, then that's definitely not working. And going back to what I was saying before, you need that sales feedback, and you also need to be able to feedback on sales, because it has to be a partnership, and if that partnership isn't isn't working effectively, then an ABM campaign won't work.
So the one thing that I found interesting on that, so I don't think most people answer that question the way you just did. So when I said revenue, right, that's like the end piece. But what you actually said is measure the pipeline, and then you can figure out where people are dropping out. So that's actually very different from just saying, oh, how much revenue comes out at the other end. So something to think about. If you guys' answer always is revenue, how do you measure the different stages of the pipeline? And believe it or not, I've seen companies that have a pipeline, but it's not very well defined or built out. So that's an interesting answer. I'm learning something different. Now,
I think
stop here.
Maybe this is similar to what you're saying, Christa. The conversations I've been having is like the conversion points.
Yeah.
I talk about like you can go in and for PT or massage or whatever, and they can go and massage on the muscle. But the connective, is the issue on the muscle itself or in the connective tissue? And all the massaging on the muscle is great, but if the issue is in the middle, so you can have a big database, but if you're not pushing anyone from that initial engagement and through and understanding what touch points are working, so that's something that we're looking at. And I've been talking about, again, Cvent, how we build brand awareness and that understanding. That top of funnel journey is something, at least in Europe. In the US, got that. People know, at least in the industry, who we are. Doing some research on it now, but generally, anecdotally, it's well known. So I'm going to spend more time now using marketing as that machine to build that database and understand where people are, who we need to contact, who are the right personas to have that dialogue. That's success for me in a year one, for example. So it's also like, again, that longer term strategy, your measurements of success in your first year of trying account-based marketing may be very different than if you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years as well.
Yeah, to follow along that point, Karen, we always preach follow the friction. I think the natural instinct when you're setting up a new program, especially ABM, is to go in chronological order, start at the top of funnel and work your way down through the conversions. But that's not always the most impactful. And you end up mis-resourcing a little bit early on. I think what you need to do is really look for those points in the deal cycles where sales needs the most lift, the most air cover to kind of continue those conversions, and start there. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's at the bottom. And then work your way out. You can always even out the foundation of your ABM later, but the more impact you can drive immediately, the more trust you'll build between your teams, and the longer it'll last.
Yeah, completely.
Totally. Early wins, quick wins are super important, and also to keep in mind that it's a long-term strategy. To wrap us up here, and I'll go first. What is your top tip for winning in ABM? And my tip, you guys will be surprised that my tip will focus around content. Surprise, I know, right? You got to have good content for people, and it has to speak the right language. It has to be, actually be good for that company, and it can't just be the same old marketing gobbledygook that we use on billboards or whatever. I know I'm being dramatic. Let's go around the room here. Christa, what's your top tip?
So for me, ABM is a strategy that really allows us to be creative and innovative in a way that I think a lot of traditional marketing strategies, they don't allow you to really kind of go for it and do something totally different. So I would say, be creative, go out there with a campaign, but also be prepared to fail fast. Measure it, make sure that you're getting the response you're getting, and if you aren't, then you need to I think ABM is a very agile strategy, so you need to be able to pivot in the same way that if a sales strategy wasn't working, you would pivot the sales strategy. So enjoy the freedom to be innovative and creative, and but be prepared to fail and move on.
Agile is always an important thing. Karen, what's your top tip?
So I was going to use, that was mine. So Christa said that, I'm going to steal one of hers that she said, because it resonates both with me, is do your homework, do the research, be clear on, are you clear on your ICP? Who you are talking to? Understand the industry they work in, their challenges. This is a combination of what are your sellers hearing, and why you've gotten in the door in the first place, but also if you understand a marketplace and that's going to make you that kind of valued partner to your sales team, but also just make sure that as you're developing your content and looking at your channels, that you're set up for success, hopefully more quickly, and then to Christa's point, fail fast and then adjust as you go.
Absolutely. Martin?
Yeah, I would say mine would be always think customer first. If you're doing that, then you can't go too far wrong, because everything else is just going to kind of fall off the back of that. So you're targeting the right customers where you're going to help them, you're going to add value for them. So that's kind of your ICP work. Understand them, so find out as much as you can about them. Be human, connect with them, because obviously the person on the receiving end of your marketing is a human with feelings. Work closely with sales, and again, that's so there's no jarring, or so the experience doesn't kind of drop, and you're just much more likely to have a positive, create a positive experience for the prospect or customer. So that would be.
Yep, awesome. And dear listeners and viewers, I'm your walking acronym dictionary here. ICP, Ideal Customer Profile. Just in case you were wondering, that's what that stands for.
All right.
I always like to. I know we have a. No, it's fine. I think we have a wide audience, and I do get that quite often. What does that stand for? What's that again? Whatever, because it's people all over the spectrum. Zach, give us your tip.
My tip would just be patience. There's a lot that goes into a successful ABM strategy. So be patient with yourself, really take your time and do your due diligence to set it up. And then you're going to have some wins, but you're also going to have some losses here and there, and stick with it and be willing to build for the long term and do things right. Don't panic and rip things out the second you hit a little adversity.
Patience is hard, and usually I run out of it, but that is some good advice as well. I learned so much from all of you. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Really appreciate you guys making the time.
Thanks, Christa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christa. Great being here.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our guests for sharing their awesome insights. Don't forget to visit webinsights.com to connect with your website visitors quicker.